For what feels like the third or fourth straight time, the Washington Commanders are about to host a team that is getting a little bit healthier as they come into this week's matchup. Meanwhile, Commanders are getting a little less scary. That and more coming up on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, and it's Locked On Seahawks. I'm David Harrison. He is Corbin Smith. We are covering each side of this Week 9 matchup, Sunday Night Football, for you. I'm doing it for WUSA 9. Corbin Smith is doing it for Emerald City Spectrum, and of course, we are both with you on our respective Locked On channels. We appreciate all of you for making this show your first view or listen of the day. And to the everydayers for each of these shows and programs, we appreciate all of you, especially for coming through every day, but also coming through for today's crossover episode. Coming up, we are going to talk about the things that are going to make the Seahawks and Commanders tick in this Week 9 matchup. We're going to talk about the biggest matchups, but it's all going to start off, at least from the Washington Commanders side, about why they're just a little less scary coming into Week 9. All of that part of the proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and it's all brought to you by Prize Picks. Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app, use the code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Corbin. So I don't know if it's the biggest matchup or the biggest story for the entire matchup of Week 9, but certainly the biggest story coming out of Washington on Wednesday. Terry McLaurin aggravated the quad injury in the loss against the Kansas City Chiefs. We were kind of fearful that he did. He was very non-committal and very basically left the door wide open after the game that, yeah, he might have aggravated that quad injury. Jaden Daniels expected to be back this weekend. He practiced in full, but without Terry McLaurin, that means that this will be the seventh time this season that either Terry McLaurin or Jaden Daniels was not on the field. They haven't played together since Week 2. So how does that sit with you?
Well, Seahawks fans are going to be looking at that saying, well, that doesn't sound too bad to me, but it's especially because Seattle's coming out of a bye week, David, and they're still battling injuries themselves. Julian Love apparently re-aggravated his hamstring injury during the bye week. And so now, in the words of Mike McDonald, he is in jeopardy of being able to play on Sunday night. And so they're looking at Julian Love missing his 5th game already this year. This hamstring has just been tricky for him. The good news is it looks like Devin Witherspoon is going to be back. He was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. He's got a great opportunity to finally get out there. They held him out, and his injury is different in nature. It's not a soft tissue injury. It was a bruised knee. So he should be somebody that isn't going to have to worry about re-aggravating it during practice. So he should be back, and they're hoping they're going to have Derek Hall back rushing off the edge to help turn the heat up on Jaden Daniels and test out his soft tissue injury in this game as well. So Seattle's getting healthier, but if there's a plus side for Washington without Terry McLaurin, well, they're going to be missing their Pro Bowl safety and Julian Love, most likely. Mario Miracle, he's not going to be playing this weekend. So you still got two teams here that are kind of in walking wounded mode, at least in some important positions with key players.
Yeah, listen, from a humanity standpoint, I hope all those guys get healthy. From a competition standpoint, hey, dude, take another week, man. Rest that hamstring. It'll be okay. Worry about Week 10. You know what I mean? It's a long season. Go ahead and take a day off. I'm sure that Seahawks fans are telling the same thing to Terry McLaurin. But speaking of that edge rush capability, Corbin, I know the Seattle Seahawks really like to get home with 4. They don't like to blitz a whole heck of a lot near the bottom of the league in blitz rates so far, but they're pretty stinking good at getting home with 4. I don't know which side of the ball that edge rusher lines up on, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really need to look it up because on one side, you got a rookie right tackle in Josh Connerly Jr. On the left side, you got Laramie Tunsil, who went out of the Kansas City Chiefs game following the first possession of the game with a hamstring injury. And hamstrings are a little bit like concussions nowadays, right? Where if you get a hamstring injury, you're almost assured to miss 1 week. He did miss practice on Wednesday. Our expectation here, I can't speak for everybody on the beat, but I can say from myself and the other reporters that I tend to talk to the most, we expect Brandon Coleman, second-year offensive lineman, who did start all last year at left tackle for the Washington Commanders, or I should say played left tackle all last year for the Washington Commanders. So there's some experience there, but you got a rookie on one side. You got a left tackle who, quite frankly, just 3 weeks ago now was a bench former left guard. So what does that dynamic tell you from a Seahawks perspective?
Well, Seattle, there's another reason they're hoping Derek Hall is going to be back so they can have their full four-headed monster off the edge. Uchenna Nwosu's playing really good football now that he's looked like he's curbed the injury bug that nipped him the last 2 years. DeMarcus Lawrence, who Washington fans know very, very well, he has been an outstanding addition for this defense. Not just the plays he's making, but the leadership, the physicality, the mindset. The young players in this team are feeding off of everything that he's bringing. They're learning from him, and he's still a very good football player in his own right. And then Boye Mafe, he doesn't have a sack yet this year, but he's got 20-plus pressures, so he's still been getting after the quarterback. And it feels like for Mafe that he is due a game where he's going to be able to get multiple sacks. Like the dam is going to burst at some point. Wonder if playing a team that's got a rookie at one tackle spot and a backup at another, that this might be the game, especially if Jaden Daniels is not 100%, which I'm assuming he plays in this game. He's still not going to be 100% probably. I'm curious to see what that is going to look like from the edge rush, especially with how difficult the interior defenders are for the Seahawks up front and the resources you have to provide to try to help on that front. This can be a team that's very difficult to deal with when you've got injuries on your offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would want to see, some extra linemen or some eligible linemen out there. Get a 6-man front out there. I'm not even adverse to going to a 7-man front. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a little bit more adverse to going with a 7-man front than I am. But whatever it takes to protect your quarterback. Because listen, I was a big fan of Nwosu when he became a free agent. I wanted Washington to go after him. That was a different regime, and obviously he's happy where he is. But what you just kind of said about Mafe getting his first career sack or first sack is potentially Donovan Ezeraku, my draft crush, the guy that when the Commanders came up on the board in the first round, I was like, he's sitting there, go get him. He went to the Cowboys. He got his first career sack last week or 2 weeks ago against the Washington Commanders, which I'm like, I'm happy for my own evaluations, but like, come on, dude, like you're going up against the team that I'm covering now. I don't want to see you do that. And Jaden, 7 in coverage, bringing a 4-man blitz. You don't feel like you necessarily need to blitz him as much if you're Mike McDonald, I assume, and that gives you the opportunity to potentially cause some problems, have him hold the ball a little bit, and certainly it's going to be something I think the Seahawks try to lean into. For the Washington Commanders, I think everybody is going to talk about this rush offense, and I know we're premature to the matchups in this game, Corbin, but when you hear me tell you, and I don't want to get into the whole matchup meat of it, we'll get into that here in a second, but when I do tell you that this team is the third best rushing team in the NFL, what do you think of? How do you kind of see that type of statistical value matching up against the Seahawks defense?
I say bring it on, just like Ernest Jones would say. Ernest Jones has been the one 2 different times after games and said, hey, if you want to try to run on us, go for it. But this run defense has been stout all year long. It's been because of the defensive line. It's been because the linebackers, their safeties and corners are coming up making plays. They've actually missed the second most tackles in the NFL. So that might be the one concern, but it hasn't really impacted their run defense at all. So this is a team that right now is playing with a lot of confidence, and Mike McDonald's got these guys in the right spots. Schematically, they are playing sound with their gaps, and they've really done a great job bottling up opposing rushing games. So this is kind of one of those best versus best type things, and bring on the challenge. I think the Seahawks will be ready for it. And certainly the Commanders will want to show that they can run the football against a team that has not given up 90 or more rushing yards in a game this season. They have been stingy for the Seahawks, especially in that front 7.
Yeah, they would love to be the first team to get that 100-yard mark on that Seahawks defense, truly. And that is going to be one of the matchups that we're watching in this Week 9 contest. Seahawks fans might be a little bit surprised to find out, though, why we're looking at that rushing attack. Commanders fans, buckle up. You already know the conversation that is about to come up on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Commanders, both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You, myself, Corbin, we all make decisions every single day. But when you go to Prize Picks, being right in those decisions can get you paid real money. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, while it still is operational. NHL is up and running. There is no better time to jump in on the action. And if you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. And if you get them right, you win. Simple, right? It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So I like to go to Prize Picks. I like to look at, especially when Jaden Daniels is actually active, I like to look at his rushing yard projections, and I like to see whether I think he'll exceed those or if he's going to come in underneath those and pick the more or the less on those line projections. So if you want to get involved in all the fun, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Today's Crossover Thursday episode also brought to you in part by Monarch. And let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, and investments. It's really easy to lose track, and that can mean that you're leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your mobile phone. Interestingly enough, I actually started using Monarch about 2 weeks before they started sponsoring the network here. So when they came on board as a sponsor, I was through the roof because like, bro, I already know this platform, and I'm not even going to tell you because it's a little bit embarrassing how many subscriptions I had that it helped me get rid of. Anyway, I'm pocketing that extra cash instead of those companies, and that's just one way that it can really help you out. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, moving forward now, today's Crossover Thursday episode. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders, Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. Corbin, we're going to get into the matchups here, and I teased that rushing offense against the rushing defense. Seahawks fans, you may not know this. This is why you watch the crossovers. This is why you do all that clicking. This is why you watch all them episodes, to badly paraphrase Bill Parcells. Corbin, this third-ranked rushing offense sounds a little bit scary. Maybe not when you're the number one rush defense, but usually it sounds a little bit scary. Here's the problem. A month ago, this was the number one rushing offense. Since then, they have faced the very bad Bears rush defense, the even worse Dallas Cowboys rush defense, and the not exactly scary Kansas City Chiefs run defense. Every single time this Washington Commanders rush offense has come out of that game ranked lower than they went in. This rush offense has kind of lost its way, lost its identity a little bit. I'm going to be completely blunt with you and be completely honest with you. It's not a unit in the front line right now in run blocking that is reestablishing or even fully establishing the line of scrimmage. So how much of a problem is that on Sunday night in Northwest Stadium for the home team?
I think it's a huge problem for the Commanders because that is not how you want to be trending when you've got to deal with Leonard Big Cat Williams, Byron Murphy, who is one of the most improved players in the NFL. He's one of the league leaders for defensive tackles and sacks. He's been making plays against the run left and right. And he's just one of those guys. He can two gap, he can one gap. Leonard Williams can do that too. Jaron Reed can do that. I mean, those guys, that is a three-headed monster. And oh, by the way, behind him, Ernest Jones is a tackling machine, one of the best run defending linebackers in the NFL. He's pretty darn good in coverage too, with 3 interceptions. And really the surprise for that front seven, Drake Thomas has taken over as a starter the last few weeks, and he has been playing out of his mind the last 2 games. Had 3 pass breakups against the Texans 2 weeks ago. Had a game where he had a sack and finished second on the team in tackles in Jacksonville. I mean, he has been playing really good football. And historically, as a guy that gets to the football, if you look at his NC State tape, had really good tackle numbers, finds the football. And the edge guys, I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence is still one of the elite edge setters when it comes to defending the run. Nwosu's rock solid at that. Boy, Mafe, I think, is underrated in that regard. Not a strength necessarily, but they've just got dudes across that line. But I look in the interior, ironically enough, with the injuries at tackle, but I look in the interior and I feel like, watching the film, that's where the Commanders may have the biggest problem here, because everybody has issues with Seattle's defensive tackles, and they've had a hard time establishing the line of scrimmage. And that's against teams that do not have, I mean, I know Kansas City's got Chris Jones, but Kansas City doesn't have a 3-headed monster like this. Certainly Dallas does not. This is a team that has as good of a defensive line as you're going to find in the NFL. So I think that this is as big of a matchup for the Seahawks from an advantage standpoint as you can have going into this game. And on the flip side, I do wonder about Seattle's offensive line, particularly the tackles, trying to keep Sam Darnold clean, because I think Washington's kind of got an under the radar edge rush going into this game. So that might be, to me, where Washington, especially at home, might have the chance to be able to make this interesting on Sunday night.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm glad you used that word, because interesting is exactly where I was going to go, because you mentioned that interior defensive line for the Seahawks. And I was looking at that earlier today, and I'm like, man, the Washington Commanders, the area they like to run the most, up the middle. That's where they like to go. Now, what confuses myself, along with Commanders fans as well, is, you've got a Goldilocks and Three Bears type of situation. Goldilocks would be Cliff Kingsbury in this case. That's not a degrading thing. It's just for the example of the story. Okay. But you got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who's more your one cut type of dude, really good. You're really good at finding space and getting upfield. You got Chris Rodriguez Jr., who's basically your ram, your bowling ball, and all those things. You got Jeremy McNichols, who's the savvy vet who does a little bit of everything. As much as the Commanders like to run up the middle, they don't use Chris Rodriguez really hardly ever at all for the last 4 weeks. They used him 2 weeks to really set the tone. It went pretty well. They kind of went away from it for whatever reason, and they haven't come back to it. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt running up the middle has not been incredibly successful, even Jeremy McNichols. And a lot of their successful runs up the middle have been quarterback, not all of them designed, a lot of them scrambling. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. And then off right tackle, that's where the Commanders are most successful. So the defense's left side, just so that if you're listening, you don't have to orient yourself. 8.5 yards per carry on average, almost to that side. But Corbin, that's where they run the least. And maybe it's because that's their rookie side, their rookie right tackle, and they don't want to pull that much and all that stuff. I don't know. But it's just interesting to me that where they run the best, they rush the least. As far as that pass rush from the Commanders goes on the other side, Jacob Martin, I think, is the player that if you're a Seahawks fan, you probably haven't really heard of him, but you need to be aware of him because these last two games.
Seattle drafted him, so I hope Seahawks fans.
Oh, well, never mind. There you go. So you should know about him.
He was traded for Clowney after his first year. He was part of that trade.
Okay. So I know his Bears history more than I know anything. So that clearly shows that. But Jacob Martin, these last 2 games, it's not like he's been on a season-long tear, okay? But Jacob Martin, these last 2 games, has really started to step up. After the team lost Dorrance Armstrong to a season-ending knee injury against the Dallas Cowboys, there was a big question of who's going to step up in his place. And Jacob hasn't really stepped up in his place, as in taking his spot. But as far as being that guy that gets the consistent pressure, Jacob Martin's been doing it. But a lot of that has predicated, Corbin, because Daron Payne is also having a career-like season. I think it's not quite as good as his actual career year that he had the last time his contract was pending, which is interesting. But he's having a really great season right now, and I think a lot of attention is being spent on the interior, which is allowing Jacob Martin to exploit the edge a little bit.
Yeah, and look, every time the Seahawks play, you have questions about, are the guards and the center going to be able to hold up? And Daron Payne is a guy that could cause real problems, especially for Anthony Bradford, a right guard. And there's a lot of talk about Seattle trying to go out and trade for his replacement right now going into the deadline, because he has really been the weak link. I mean, Gray Zabel's done a really nice job at left guard. Jalen Sundell has been solid as a first-year starter as well. He's had his issues, though, against stronger defensive linemen. So it feels like that could also be an area of potential concern, as usual, for the Seahawks going into this game. And more so with the run game, because this team has been so weird, David. They are 29th or 27th in rushing yards per game. They're 31st in yards per carry. And they are 29th in EPA. So basically, that would tell you this has been a really bad running football team. But they are in the top 10 in explosive runs. They are in the top 10 in design runs of 15-plus yards. And they've scored 8 touchdowns in the red zone. So they've been as good as anybody at finishing drives and short yardage situations. So it's kind of one of those, like, who are the Seahawks when it comes to running the ball? But that's going to be something to watch in this game, because I feel like Seattle's going to have that run game going some in order to make sure that Washington can't pin back, and they have to take the play action seriously, because that's where Sam Darnold has been eviscerating teams this year, is off play action to Jackson Smith and Jigba. And if Washington is not respecting the run game and they're spitting on those play fakes, that takes that away. So I'm looking at that line matchup from a run game standpoint, more so than pass rushing, because Seattle's line, knock on wood, has done a good job for the most part protecting Sam Darnold. The run blocking has been shaky at times.
Yeah. I do want to dive a little bit more into that, and then we've got one more matchup we need to cover before we get into the final part of the discussion points here on this crossover episode. But we're going to do that here on the other side of this message on this crossover episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Seahawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover Thursday episode is brought to you in part by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every single ride and has more IIHS Top Safety Plus Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. Athletes work on everything from footwork to breath work. They sweat all of the details. And Mazda brings the same with every single vehicle, the attention and how they craft every single model of vehicle with the available Napa leather upholstery, the metallic accents, and the available all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. You can drive with confidence through almost every single season. Like the players, Mazda sweats every single detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. With Mazda, move and be moved. Final segment here of this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Commanders. And Corbin, we left there just talking about some of these matchups. One more matchup that I want to get into is, I know you've got your eye on Marshon Lattimore a little bit, but I will tell you the play action thing is very interesting because eye discipline has been and continues to be a problem for the Washington Commanders defense against the Kansas City Chiefs in the second half. If you watch the national shows, you already know in the first half held Patrick Mahomes to 7 points, turned 2 takeaways, all those things very opportunistic. But in the second half, a lot of eye discipline problems leading to wide open receivers, allowing the Chiefs to get back on track, get comfortable doing what they're doing. They end up scoring 21 points. So the Commanders run away with that game on Monday night. So that is a big issue. But what do you have your eye discipline on Marshon Lattimore for?
I have my eyes there because I'm waiting to see who is going to step up. Is Lattimore the guy? He's coming out of a game where he had an interception and made some plays. There were some struggles early in the year for him. I want to see if Lattimore in the Battle of Ohio State alums, I want to see how he does against JSN, because to this point, nobody has stopped Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think a lot of people in the Texans game were thinking, I think Houston's got an elite secondary. I thought this might be the game we see JSN get shut down a little bit and Seattle's going to have to rely on secondary targets. That didn't happen. He was still running open all over the place. They were trying to bracket him. It didn't work. I am very curious what happens when you put two guys that are both Ohio State alums. And in the fact that Lattimore, I know, has publicly talked about some of the struggles earlier this year and believing he can play better. That's going to be kind of a litmus test for him. Can I go in and shut down this other guy from my alma mater? Can I, or at least slow him down some? And I also look at the middle of the field with Cooper Kupp. He has not had the best season in terms of statistics. He's been reliable when they've used him, but I was watching the middle of Washington's defense on Monday night, and they just look slow. And I hate taking that shot at Bobby Wagner because of what he meant to Seattle and the player he is. But Kansas City was just picking that middle of the defense apart. And whether it's using wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, I'm anticipating that Seattle is going to try to take advantage of that in this football game. And that might mean we see a little bit more from guys like Cooper Kupp, who play extensively in the slot and can create issues for defenders. That might be the one thing, I'm wondering on the outside, maybe the Commanders have the guys to be able to handle, but when they funnel it inside and those crossers and things like that, is that going to be an issue for Bobby Wagner in the middle of this Commanders defense that doesn't have a ton of speed there at this point?
Yeah, I think the good news is we saw the Commanders defense, at least from the Washington side. You saw the Commanders defense make some adjustments going up against Kansas City Chiefs and try to do some things to not get Bobby Wagner in those situations, because offenses have been trying to isolate him all season long to very good amounts of success so far. However, the Chiefs, again, they get paid to adjust and to do what they do as well. And like you said, especially in the second half there, they were able to find ways to exploit that matchup. Anyways, another week. So we'll see if Joe Witt Jr., the D coordinator for the Washington Commanders, has figured that out. And that's going to be one of the things they need to do in order to win this game for sure. But Corbin, the three things I've got my eye on for Washington to do to win this game this weekend: win the turnover battle. They turned over Patrick Mahomes twice. Fantastic. Problem is, You also gave it up twice. So you come out even in the turnover battle. You got to win the turnover battle for a team that has not been taking the ball away very much, and they've been giving the ball away at a more alarming rate, especially recent games. You got to focus on that. At least if you can't get one off of Sam Darnold or somebody else, at least don't give it away, right? Neutralize the deep shots and also the returns. And, of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba is a big part of that. If you're watching on YouTube, you've seen the Ohio State helmets behind me, so you know that I know Jackson Smith and Jigba pretty well. Looking forward to seeing him play again. Hopefully, looking forward to seeing him walk off the field. A little bit sad for the sake of my audience, but also special teams. Torrey Horton, I mean, I think that he is going to be a factor in this game. Luke McCaffrey is going to be a factor in this game. So not just the deep shots in passing games, but also the return ability of these guys, because those things can change field position and make a significant impact on every single game. And then committing to offensive efficiency, red zone and short passes have to be something that this team expects to do. Don't expect to go out there and hit 35-yarders, hit from out front from distance, grind out some drives, get into the red zone, impose your will and score some touchdowns against the Seahawks defense. And that, I think, is the blueprint. Easier said than done, of course, but that is the blueprint to beating the Seahawks on Sunday night.
Yeah, and for me, the three things I'm looking for, we'll see what Jaden Daniels looks like health-wise. I think the fact that they've got him going full bore at practice is a good sign for his health. But early on, I don't care if he's been battling injuries. They have got to make sure that they are dotting their I's, crossing their T's when it comes to containing his run game ability, and make sure that you are maintaining your pass rushing lanes. I call it aggressive cautiousness, and you had to do it against Kyler Murray, but I think Jaden Daniels is a superior player that you have to worry about. This is more in the Lamar Jackson category, where you cannot let him destroy you with his legs, and maybe that cuts down the number of quarterback hits you can get back there in the pocket, but you have got to make sure that you're not getting too far upfield. You're not giving those escape lanes for him. That's thing number one for me. Key number two, I mentioned earlier, the run game, and it's going to sound fascinating to Seahawks fans, because I've been complaining about how much they've been running to the perimeter, because I don't feel like that, especially for Zach Charbonnet, that's not his game. However, in this particular game, I just mentioned how, there's some concerns about athleticism at the middle level there. I want to test those guys out. I want to get Bobby Wagner running. I want to get Frankie Louva running. I want to get that perimeter game going some, especially with Ken Walker III. I think you get that run game going where you are getting that wide zone and those sweeps in, and you are really forcing those linebackers to stretch out some. It opens up the passing game in the middle too, which I think can be a big thing for this team. So I think the perimeter ground game is going to be really important in this matchup. And last but not least for me, going into this game, limit the yak, especially against a guy like Deebo Samuel, who has been a Seahawks killer over the years. Don't let him break a bunch of tackles after the catch and get a bunch of big plays. Bring him down when he gets the football in his hands and play physical football against him and the rest of that receiving core. They're going to have to rely more on that without Terry McLaurin in the lineup too. You can't let that happen. They're ninth in the NFL for most yak given up this year. A lot of that being because of the missed tackle issues. You can't do that in this game, or you could give the Commanders a few of the big plays they need to win this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, every Commanders fan, their heart just sank when they heard you talk about the Seahawks running left and right. Seahawks fans, if you want to see what that might look like, go to the third quarter Monday night against Kansas City Chiefs, and that's really when the Chiefs started attacking the perimeter like Corbin described. It worked pretty well. So definitely a smart angle to possibly take on Sunday night against the Washington Commanders for the Seahawks. But, of course, there are things the Commanders can do as well to anticipate that and plan for it. So it's going to be a fun matchup. Hopefully going to be a really good game, especially for those of us that are going to be up until probably about midnight Eastern time checking this whole thing out. That's going to do it for today's crossover episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, Locked On Seahawks, we'll wrap up our looks at this Week 9 matchup and give you everything you need on each side of the competition to know before we head into the weekend. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL. Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins give you two cracks at the national outlook on the National Football League, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode. Commanders fans, Seahawks fans, everybody out there, enjoy the game. We will talk to you again real soon on our respective Locked On shows, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.